the television event of the year, is set to premiere on PBS stations across the country, and Insights will recall the mood of Hawaii during the Vietnam era. Were we as passionately divided as the rest of the country? In 1966, Buffalo Springfield declared, "Nobody's right if everybody's wrong." So after decades of trying to forget, are we ready to talk about Vietnam? This live broadcast and live stream of Insights on PBS Hawaii start now.
Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Laurie Yamada. Approximately 16,000 men and women from Hawaii served in Vietnam. The National Archives lists 276 local men who were killed in action or killed while missing. Nearly a third of these casualties of war were local boys, 21 years of age or younger. Hawaii also ranks as 20th among all states for the highest percentage of casualties among the male 18 to 44 population at that time. Now, a few would argue the 2.7 million who served and nearly 60,000 who never came home failed to receive the respect and gratitude extended to veterans today. However, those who served in Vietnam were introduced to an intolerable condition called post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, and the lingering deadly impact of exposure to chemicals like Agent Orange. But the war in Southeast Asia wasn't the only battle. On the home front, the mood was toxic. The war was the centerpiece for bitter political and generational division. And tonight we'll find out what the mood was like here in Hawaii. Our guests tonight include two Vietnam War veterans. One became the lead VA therapist in Hawaii who counseled Vietnam vets, a political chief reporter for a local newspaper during that era, and will be joined via a taped interview by former U.S. Senator Daniel Akaka, who celebrated his 93rd birthday this weekend. We hope you'll join tonight's conversation by email, phone call, or social media, and you'll find a live stream of this program at pbshawaii.org or the PBS Hawaii Facebook page. All right, now to our guests. Tom Kaufman was the chief political reporter for the Honolulu Star-Advertiser from 1968 to 1973 and is currently an independent writer and producer. He referred to the divisiveness of the Vietnam War in 3 of his books, Catch a Wave, The Island Edge of America, and his biography of the labor lawyer, Supreme Court Justice Edward Nakamura, I Respectfully Dissent. Tim Gard enlisted and served as a commissioned naval officer during the Vietnam War. He commanded a swift boat in what was considered a hot zone in the Mekong Delta. Before leaving the Navy in 1977, he was picked to command the USS Esteem, a minesweeper. He is the owner now of McCabe, Hamilton, and Rennie, Hawaii's oldest stevedoring company, where he serves as the firm's president and CEO. And Steve Molnar served in the Army in Vietnam from 1967 to 1968. He received his BA and advanced degrees in sociology and social work from the University of Hawaii. He was hired in 1979 to be the original team leader of the VA Center in Honolulu. He is widely recognized for his work in the community on behalf of veterans, such as conferences on PTSD, the State Agent Orange program, and the Memorial Day weekend candlelight service for Vietnam veterans at Punch Bowl. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here tonight. We're leading into, as we mentioned, into this long and very deep series by Ken Burns on the Vietnam War. So we want to kind of take everyone back a little bit to what the mood was like at the time, and at times in particular focus on what it was like here in Hawaii. And again, Tom, you were deeply entrenched in the politics, into all the news that was coming in and out, the confusion that was happening at the time throughout that period. And in fact, you were saying before we came into the show that it was literally right at the time when things were really starting to fracture that you came here and launched into covering the chaos that was happening here.
What happened was that simultaneously, Hawaii played a unique role in the escalation of the war because President Johnson came here repeatedly and to confer with the military or to confer with Vietnamese who were running South Vietnam at the time.
This is 65.
65, 66, 67. And simultaneously, the protest against the war was springing up at the university and in prominently the ILWU, which was at the time tremendously influential. And this division was just starting to run through the whole community and through the political system. So the iconic story was that by, I think it was 1968, John A. Burns, the iconic father figure of statehood Hawaii, devoted his entire State of the State address to supporting the war in Vietnam and saying that the cause was freedom, and that was the reason that Hawaii's people had given their lives in the past, and that's why people today were fighting and dying. And it was extraordinary because that's not what State of State is supposed to be about at all. It's supposed to be about the condition of state government. But he was very personally close to to Lyndon Johnson, who had helped him get statehood for Hawaii. And it was tremendously emotional, and people were, in the legislature, many people were outraged, and it was only a couple of days later the legislature passed a resolution almost unanimously condemning the war in Vietnam. And so it was like that. And this is involving the most prestigious person who, you know, at the time and in history, perhaps. You know.
And you were talking before we started about, even as a journalist, even with all the information that you had access to at the time and all of the people that you were talking to, still within your own internal circles and for yourself even, it was so hard to think about, okay, what is right, what is wrong, how do I feel? I mean, I can't imagine trying to make those decisions, putting it down on paper.
It wasn't about me so much, but it was about the whole society and about people fighting and dying and the course that the country was going to take in history and its use of the tremendous power that the United States wields. And you know, the war itself couldn't be defined. Was it a war against international communist aggression, or was it American imperial projection into a civil war, for example? And those are very tremendously polar opposite views. And both were articulated vigorously by powerful people, intellectually powerful people. So it was that kind of debate.
At the time, the two of you young men entering into the war, how did you remember the mood at the time?
Well, I can speak for myself. My dad was a disabled Marine who fought in World War II. And there was an expectation that when your country called you, you would go to war. And when I got to Vietnam, I thought we were going to win the war that year in 1967. But it was much more complicated than any of us had been told. It was much more confusing than we had anticipated. And we didn't really, most Vietnam veterans didn't have, or most soldiers did not have a geopolitical view. Whether it was communism we were fighting, the Domino theory, what was the purpose? We knew the purpose was our country called us, and we went. And our goal was to survive that year and to get back to the world. This is where the big PX was. This is where everything would be fine again. But then when you leave Vietnam like that, you realize that you've left your friends behind. Because we unlike other wars, or including the wars now, we didn't usually go in units. We went individually. As we were talking before, I can remember being at Travis Air Force Base, and every morning they would call the roll, and we'd all go out and we'd wait for our name to be called. And eventually we had the orders, and we got on a plane with 200 strangers, and we flew to Vietnam, and we got off, and we spent our year there. And when it was over, We hoped that we wouldn't get rocketed that night, because that did happen. Some folks were killed on the last night in country. You know, they got rocketed or mortared. And then we got on the plane with 200 strangers and we flew back home. And our homecoming, pretty much, as I recall, we were encouraged not to wear our uniforms because it was felt that that would draw attention to us, ridicule, maybe protest. And so you quickly just wanted to sort of disappear when you came back home.
Wow. We were talking about, before the show started, about some of your experiences as well as a swift boat right out there, and what it was like. It really is hard to comprehend until you, talk to someone like yourself. You take a look at some of the pictures. And everybody was so young at the time, too, and to understand you're dropped into this strange world. What do you remember? What sticks out to you at the time?
Well, there are a lot of thoughts that are coming into my mind tonight because, as my wife would tell you, most of what I will say tonight I haven't discussed. I've kind of put it away in a little box in a filing cabinet somewhere, and once in a while I'll pull out what to me is a priceless treasure of my memory and savor the moment, put it back in the box, and return it to its storage area. But I look at myself as sort of the accidental combatant. I was very comfortable living here in the mid-1960s. I was married. I had a lovely home on Colonel and Ole Highway, and job with one of the big companies downtown. Surfed when I wanted to, and thought, man, this is a pretty cool life for me. Then one day, the greetings letter, and many of your viewers will remember what the greetings letter was from your Selective Service System board, saying, greetings, you will report for a pre-induction physical prior to being shipped off to Fort Ord to get, trained to do something in a military specialty. And I thought, gee whiz, I didn't think that this is going to come about and interrupt my plans, So I chose the Navy, figuring that if I got on a ship, I'd at least be several miles offshore, right? And the artillery couldn't get out to me. Well, fundamentally that was flawed, because the Navy saw a different role for me, and I wound up with 2 combat tours, one of which I was on a swift boat, which was, let's just say, pretty darn exciting.
Wow. What do you remember about being there in those channels we were looking at? You can't even see what's around you beyond the channel itself.
No, you can't. You avoided the narrowest ones. The rule was, if you can turn the boat around, you can go up. The boat was 62 feet, so there wasn't a lot of room to turn that boat around. But that's where you'd get in the most trouble. If somebody was going to lay an ambush for you, it wouldn't be out on the main river. It would be in one of those little tributaries. Before
you left, and before you got there, what was your thought as to what was happening there? Was there an understanding beyond what you knew you had to do militarily?
Yeah.
Or?
I should have known better. I was an international relations student, major in college, but
as Tom was talking about, so much was changing so rapidly.
Yeah, I think when we got over there, we realized a tremendous difference between what we were being told the war was like and what it was about. And when we went in country, it turned out to be something quite different. The politicians had their deal going, the military had its deal going, various groups, very divisive society that resulted in, you'll recall, there was just a tremendous amount of discord and dissatisfaction with all kinds of groups over the spectrum.
I want to lead into a little clip here. This is from former U.S. Senator Daniel Akaka. During these years, former U.S. Senator Daniel Akaka was making a transition from being a teacher and a principal to public service. So we asked him if Hawaii was as passionately divided as the rest of the country over the Vietnam War. Take a listen.
Yes. I feel that people were uncertain about Vietnam. They realized that part of it was because of communism that was growing and moving, and to hold it up or to move it back, the U.S. moved in there. And when I say uncertainty too, people weren't sure about why we were there. And so there was a division of feelings for both the veterans as well as the people of the country as to why are we there. And the thing that we learned was that the Vietnam veterans were really having difficulty there because of the jungles, the rice paddies, and it was such a different environment, and the people. So the thing is, we lost a lot of people, and what also was happening was a lot of the natives were killed as well. So so here was the Vietnam War moving on, and so the mood was very uncertain, and in a way it was due to misunderstanding.
Talking about misunderstandings, maybe Tom, I'll ask you about this, and Steve, you mentioned it as well, the domino theory in Southeast Asia. What was that about? That's a big part of the justification by the government to go into Vietnam, into the Vietnam War.
Yeah, the top reaches of the government and the military basically argued that if South Vietnam fell, that Laos and Cambodia and possibly Thailand would follow, and so that all of Southeast Asia would be communist. And it was at a time when the doctrine of containment, which had begun with the containment of Russia, and then spread to the question of China, and then to the issues of Korea and the Philippines, actually. The doctrine of containment was very much American foreign policy.
So this was the belief, or what was being pushed by the government on a national level. Did that trickle down here to politics here? Was there that belief at that point in time as well, or was that really also already a very divisive issue?
Well,
or was that the belief for a period of time here?
No, I think it was widely believed. Certainly, Governor Burns, I think the congressional delegation, certainly Senator Inouye, Senator Matsunaga, both of whom were prominent World War II veterans, ascribed to it in their time. And the Central Command of the Navy was here, and the Army headquarters, so on. It was all very influential people who basically were organized around this doctrine of containment and the belief that if South Vietnam fell to the communists, then the rest of Southeast Asia would.
So amongst military circles, is that what was being discussed? Is that what was being pushed to all of you as one of the reasons why soldiers and the military needed to do this, not just to serve your country, but because this is what was happening? Was that the understanding?
I think you bought whatever you believed, and depended who you talked to. Even in Vietnam, you had hawks and doves, and people were for the war and against the war, and then as time went on and the war changed, and it involved more and more Americans, and as the death toll rose, I mean, I was talking to Tim beforehand, and you look at, you had almost 60,000 people that were killed in Vietnam, soldiers and Marines and Navy and so forth, and yet, 60% of them, almost 70% of them were killed within 3 years. 67, 68, and 69, almost 70% were killed. And 60% of all the deaths in Vietnam of Americans were 21 or younger. And so it really depends who you talk to. And if you went to the university, you talk to people, they would think the domino theory was just absolutely absurd. If you talk to other people, they'd say, absolutely. Even all the way to Australia, we're talking New Zealand, we could lose them. And in some ways, Vietnam was really just an extension of the Cold War. We were sort of, as Tom said, part of the Cold War containment. So, and most veterans in the field, we didn't have a geopolitical sense. We were there. We were either drafted or enlisted, and we were there, and our goal was to get through it and do the best we could in that year we were there. Or in the case of the Marines, 13 months, because they always had an extra month, and then come home.
40,000 dying in just those 3 years.
Yeah.
Those numbers are staggering.
Yeah.
16,000 casualties in 1968 alone. This is during that time frame when the two of you were there.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, the mood was just, everybody was just doing what they needed to do. There's so much time has passed for people to now think about it and reflect. But going back to the communist, the mindset of the communist influence, you talked about that so much in your book, and about the example of Oliver Lee and what was happening at the university, and how that was a big turning point at that point in time because of what the university was faced with and what Oliver Lee stood for.
Well, the protest against the war was led by Oliver Lee, Dr. Willis Butler, who was a doctor at Kaiser. Jack Hall, head of the LWU, signed on to it very early. And it grew from there into a movement which got tangled up with the question of tenure for Oliver Lee, which is a very complicated story, but a very messy story. But it led to Bachman Hall sit-ins, student takeover of the administration building. It led to the abrupt resignation of an extremely popular figure at the time was Dr. Thomas Hamilton, and then it rippled downtown. At the time, everybody was taking this tremendous pride in the University of Hawaii, and the line which Dr. Kamens, who was an economics professor, wrote was something like the golden age of the university was over.
And that's when a lot of students were leaving, in part because they didn't want to be part of the war, for one, and then everything else that was happening.
Well, there were students who were leaving famously students who were leaving for Canada.
Yeah. So you talked about, before having to be deployed, before having to leave. What life was like here in Hawaii. Obviously the mindset was clearly changing because people were getting wrapped up in the war, but this was a place of peace in so many ways, and a symbolism to people elsewhere in the country. But this was Hawaii with palm trees, and the mindset was different. And you had a chance to surf out in the ocean. Do you think that made it more difficult in some shape or form, or for soldiers to have to leave here or to understand what was happening in a place like this?
Yeah, there was a real juxtaposition there. I know personally for me, living that comfortable life, and as my status changed, and I went off to Officers Candidate School, and the steps that followed beyond that, I found myself in a situation that I'd never contemplated, never thought about, but I'll tell you, when I got over there, and the stuff started flying, there's only one thing on your mind, and that is give it back as good as you get it and stay alive. And I will tell you, my objective for much of the 13 months I was there in that tour was to simply stay alive by being more aggressive, being smarter, by employing our assets. But as you know, as far as the guys who were running the war, Washington was way out of sight, you know, and through mismanagement of our foreign relations policies and our military policies and various doctrines on a multiple scale, the war effort was doomed. I mean, I knew when I was there, when I was leaving in 1970, that it wasn't going to happen. There wasn't going to be a favorable outcome that would please the American public.
At that point, too, 68, 69, 70, did you get the sense here that people knew this war was doomed at that point even? Or did it take a little bit more time?
We were told quite the opposite, wouldn't you say, Tom? I mean, so often the news, you know, that was made the headlines was not, simply was not the truth.
The government managed news, meaning what the government fed the news media heavily, was about gains, great offensives. The awful phrase body counts was often used, and the body counts were always way out of proportion, ours versus theirs, and so on. So there was a lot of propaganda to the effect that somehow America was prevailing, and fundamental to this was America has never lost a war. Therefore, America won't lose this war.
And that's why in '68, I believe it was, the Tet Offensive was considered such a big turning point when people realized what was happening. I don't know who wants to jump in and explain this for those who don't know, but that was, I think to a lot of people, the slap in the face that America could lose a war.
Yeah, well, I think up until that point, Westmoreland was arguing that if we had a few 100,000 more troops or whatever, we could win this. And, you know, and this was being debated back and forth. And suddenly on January 31st, 1968, and I was there that night, all hell broke loose. I mean, Saigon, the embassy was taken over. It was just an amazing change of events. And then by March 31st...
What did you know at that point as far as what was happening? Or did you know?
All we knew is that everything was up for grabs, you know. And it was just an incredible moment in time. And I think when you asked earlier about whether we knew the war was lost or not, I think when President Johnson came on the air on March 31st and says, "I will not run," we're in Vietnam, we're saying, my God, we've just been through all this and the president is getting out. And then Walter Cronkite, after he'd visited, you know, I think it was Hue or Khe Sanh, and, you know, he'd come back and said, you know, this is not going to end well. And that's, I think, then a lot of us, you know, the common conversation was, we don't want to be the last one to die in Vietnam. And I think, you know, although we won Tet, I mean, every battle, you know, we defeated and we regained that territory, and we did incredible stuff during Tet. Every Vietnam vet can be just incredibly proud of what they accomplished. But we had lost the country. The country wanted out. And they began.
So for people who don't know, the Tet Offensive was the North really making this strong movement to the South and having the kind of impact that they hadn't had before, and really changing the war at that point.
Yeah, it changed the character of the war, where many of our troops had been fighting guerrilla irregulars, the Viet Cong specifically, and the Tet Offensive poured tens of thousands of North Vietnamese regulars into the country. It was a very well-planned offensive that took place all over South Vietnam. It was eventually repulsed, but
at what a price.
With considerable repercussion.
Okay, so this is a bit of a tough question here, but I want to ask one of these viewer questions. The Vietnam War spread through 3 presidents. I don't know who wants to tackle this one. Does anyone here on the panel think that the war would have ended sooner or differently if President Kennedy had not been assassinated. Anybody want to take on that one?
If I was born rich, you know, I mean, it's hard to say. You just don't know. I mean, history has a way of.
You know, the only thing I could add to the discussion on that was that Kennedy was a bright guy, and he understood foreign affairs, and he understood how to deal with the opposition. And he and Khrushchev really solved the problem of Cuba. Cuba could have exploded into a nuclear war. And they sort of like let Fidel Castro hang out there to dry in the wind while they went about seeking a solution to get not necessarily demilitarize Cuba, but to reduce the threat levels there with by removing the nuclear weapons. And I think, you know, if you'd taken that intuitiveness that Kennedy had and applied, if he was still alive and had applied it to Vietnam, yes, there could have been a very different outcome.
Definitely a what-if question.
I would second what Tim says, and I sat and listened one day to Senator Wayne Morris, who was an outspoken critic of the war, describe a conversation that he had with John F. Kennedy before his death, in which Kennedy was asking more serious questions about the war in a very critical vein, that led Morse to believe that if Kennedy had lived, he would have de-escalated.
Tough discussion to have.
If he had gotten rid of McNamara.
Let's hear from Senator Akaka again. Here's another clip we have from him. We touched on what Governor Burns was doing at the time. Let's get a little more into that. We spoke to many Vietnam veterans about what it was like to come home. Also, one name was mentioned frequently as an individual who went out of his way to reach out to struggling veterans. In 1971, Governor John Burns appointed an educator to the Office of Economic Opportunity. Today, we call it the Office of Community Services. That was the beginning of a long legacy of supporting our veterans. We asked Senator Akaka how it all began.
Yes, well, through family and their families, who would, you know, in our chats, would say, "Oh, my brother, we can't understand, you know, how he's feeling." And the kind of general feeling that was emanating from this was that the things that they love to do, such as surfing, you know, and whatever as a young person, when they came back, they didn't want to surf anymore. And of course, for the families, hey, what's happening? And really, when I look back at that time, we did not understand what it was. And actually it became PTSD. And that wasn't being treated. There were no benefits, no services. As a matter of fact, when they returned, in a sense, they were alone, doing their own thing, which was not productive. And as a result, people looked at Vietnam veterans as people who are, you know, unproductive. They don't know what they're doing, and in a sense, it was true. But on the other hand, the government didn't deal with this or took care of it to help them. Like, for instance, I was surprised when I got into Congress that Agent Orange problems were not given services. And when I inquired, they said it's not on the list. Well, one of the early things I did was to get that orange on the list so they can have the psychological care that they needed. And during that time, veteran services were primarily physical, broken limbs, you know, but not mental. And these problems were mental health. And these people were just left alone. So as a result, I would say that some of the responses that I got at that time was, oh, don't trust the government. I mean, the government not helping us, and which was too bad, and yet, in a sense, that was correct. So while I was chairman of the Veterans Affairs Committee, I jacked up, the budget. And of course I had problems, but I jacked it up and to say we owe it to them. We need to get them back home sound and sane and healthy.
Steve, I want to ask you in a minute about your experiences and also treating PTSD and the services that you offered. But first, Tim, I wanted to mention this quote that you brought up in an article that you did not that long ago. You said, this is about returning home, what your experience was like. And you said, I remember disembarking from my flight at the Honolulu International Airport and being shocked to see effigies of American servicemen hanging from coconut trees. We came home to a nation of fellow Americans who hardly seemed to care that we had ever left. People were apathetic at best, divisive at worst. That was the experience when you returned home.
It was etched into my mind to this very day. I was absolutely shocked that blame the politicians, blame the military leaders, but the poor guy that sits in a foxhole and then comes home to a state and a country that treat him so disrespectfully. Now, I think here in Hawaii we were probably a little better off because of the percentage of the population that had military service and that went off to Vietnam, I think gave us perhaps as a community a little better understanding of what the war was like. But nevertheless, there was that presence, and I'll never forget that experience of mine at the airport.
And you, Steve, when you returned?
It was, I didn't see the effigies, but I remember somebody had hand painted a piece of wood welcoming us home, but it wasn't very attractive. And then we walked to the airport, through the airport, and you felt, I landed in San Francisco, and you felt like, you just felt like you didn't belong. You felt so different, and people looked at you in your uniform as if, and you just wanted to get out of it, But I think another issue too, though, is that when the veteran returned home, there weren't a lot of services either here or nationally. I mean, we had very few services. If you can remember, the VA was above Little George's seafood restaurant. You remember that down at Ala Moana? I mean, we didn't even have a government building. It was the 3rd and 4th floor was the entire VA. I think even up until 1980, we only had 2 psychiatrists in the entire state working for the VA. We had 3 psychologists. We had 1 psych tech. We had very few services. And a part of that was, just our culture and many of our AJAs who fought in World War II, they didn't ask for a lot of stuff. They were just happy to be home. And if it wasn't for people like Sparky Matsunaga and for Danny Noy and Dana Kaka, we would have gotten very little. And they spoke up and they made sure that, like the Vet Center program is a good example. Congress fought that for years. Really? Senator Cranston in 1971 held hearings, 73 held hearings, 75 held hearings. And neither the VA at that time nor the House would support it. It wasn't until 1979 that we actually had vet centers. And 2 short years later, when Reagan came in, they were trying to cancel the vet centers. They didn't want them. And it was, you know, kind of an upswelling of Vietnam veterans, and the media came and said, this is wrong. You've got to provide some kind of care for these veterans. And you look at, you know, many Vietnam veterans came back and people wonder why they didn't go to school. There's a lot of reasons they didn't go to school. We had a horrible GI Bill. When I got back, it was $130 a month. That paid for everything. You got $130 to pay for tuition, for books, for rent, for food, for transportation. The World War II GI Bill and the GI Bill today that we now have is much different. If you can get into Harvard, the government will pay.
You know, this leads into a question that one of our viewers had asked, kind of circles around this same sort of mindset. For the two of you, I'm not sure who sent in this question. Our country did not treat you or Vietnam vets returning home very well. Does it make you feel better or maybe bittersweet when you see how our country honors service people now?
Oh, I'm delighted. I mean, part of what our as Vietnam veterans, we wanted to make sure that no other generation of veteran was ever treated as badly as the nation had treated the Vietnam veteran. We don't want pity. We just want people to be treated fairly. We want them to get the benefits that they've earned and deserve. We want them to have the health care, as Senator Caucus said, that they need. You know, so yeah, we feel, I can speak for myself. I feel wonderful how the country is responding now.
Agreed, absolutely.
I mean, the need for that. You were talking earlier in the break or before the show started about when you returned, it was so different. You felt different, obviously, for the experiences you went through. The world was different. And then to try and assimilate back into that without any help at the time. I mean, you obviously saw the need. You dedicated yourself to that for so many years. What were the experiences and stories that you shared? What did it even take to get soldiers to come forth, veterans to come forth and talk about it, considering the way that they were treated initially coming back, and then to try and bring this all up again?
Well, there was very little help because after World War II, in World War II we had something called combat neurosis or combat fatigue. But right in the middle of the Vietnam War, for some reason, the APA got rid of that. And they just called it adjustment disorder. So even if you went to the VA to get treatment, there was no such thing as PTSD. PTSD didn't come until 1980. And most of us got back from Vietnam in 68, 69, 70. There was not even a diagnosis of PTSD. So even if you showed up at a mental health clinic, they're not going to treat you properly. And this is one of the critical things about the Vet Center program. We approached it that, one, we're going to hire as many combat veterans as we can, because Vietnam veterans would at least trust talking to another veteran. They may not trust talking to a shrink for a couple reasons. One is that there may be some anger and resentment there that person probably got a deferment, got a really good job, and now I'm sitting here spilling my guts to him or her. You know, and so many of them would not go to mental health clinics, and they didn't want a diagnosis. It was tough enough getting a job when you got back from Vietnam if you couldn't go to school. Only 19% of the Vietnam veterans ever completed the training. Even though if you look at the VA records, they say 76% enrolled in the GI Bill. Well, most of them didn't complete it because you could make more money on unemployment, $400 a month, than you could going to school at 130. And you look at the hospitals after, during Vietnam, they were horrible. In 1968, Congress passed a law called the Revenue and Expenditure Act, which made all federal agencies cut back to 66 levels. We lost doctors, we couldn't fund hospitals, and if you ever saw the movie Born on the 4th of July, a lot of people think it's exaggerated. It was not. Ron Kovic, that was his experience in being in the Bronx VA. So there weren't a lot of places for Vietnam veterans to go, and we came back to a job market that was horrible, and inflation rates that were terrible, and most people really didn't want to hire Vietnam veterans because there were negative connotations about us. Walking time bombs, tripwire vets, all that kind of stuff. So many of my friends I know and other veterans didn't even put their military service on their resumes. It was better to hide it than have people question it, wonder how stable you were. So there was a lot of things that I think Vietnam veterans faced, in addition to not having PTSD treatment.
As you watched the politics, as you moved through the actions of the decision makers who were deciding where the money was going to go, what they were going to support, post Vietnam War, were you still seeing, people are asking about what kind of corruption levels that you felt you saw at that point? I don't know if you saw it as more of misunderstandings and leading to bad judgment, or were we sinking into levels of corruption at this point that were impacting every decision that went forth after the war?
I can't answer the question the way you framed it, really, okay? What I think I saw was just an increasingly toxic environment in which support for the war, opposition to the war, everything became confused. People who protested the war believed they were protesting the war partly on behalf of either the soldiers who were there or on behalf of preventing more people from being sent there. But increasingly, the protest movement, as it mounted and piled up in the streets, and people began fighting in the streets, et cetera, the whole thing got uglier and uglier, and people then interpreted the protests as being, trashing returning GIs, and some of that did go on. Mm-hmm. It did go on. But did that have to do with employers not wanting to hire GIs? No. It became so horrendously tangled, and and I think it remains a kind of swamp of potential ill will to this day if we dredge it all up.
So again, Ken Burns, speaking of dredging some of this up, really delving deep into every aspect of the war, what led into it, and really bringing a lot of this back in a very extensive series that's coming up on Sunday about the Vietnam War. So we have a little excerpt here from the Oregonian, this I think came in today, saying that his film, being the most powerful produced, the most despairing also, no optimism, no moments of lyricism, a very stark portrait of throughout. And you talked about how, when everybody came back, when everybody was talking about it after the war, there wasn't this sense of we won or we didn't win. I think that was one of the questions that one of the viewers had. If there was a clear idea of what winning would be while they were fighting, even then, was there that sense? I mean, this is, I think, the reason why this series that's coming up was put in this light, because that's a true reflection of, even to this day, how people see the war.
Well, for the grunt in the foxhole, who's told for the umpteenth time that I want you to go and take Hill 465. And they have a horrendous battle to get to the summit of 465, and they stick around there for a couple of days, and the command orders them off Hill 465, only to send them back to Hill 465 a week later. I mean, that's the kind of crazy stuff that went on. I think partially where we failed is, number one, the politicians in large part, I think you might agree, fought the war. At least it was said in Vietnam that the battlefield decisions were not being made by the battlefield commanders. Those decisions on important strategic elements of the war were going back to Washington, and Washington didn't have a clue as to how to process the war. So I think that was a factor. I think the other thing is that we tried to play the political game. We had friends who we had assassinated. I believe President Diem was one of the casualties of that. We brought a guy by the name of Big Min. Remember Big Min? And he was about as corrupt as somebody in the Irish mafia. Better not use that word. It was. I mean it.
There's a succession of Vietnamese military who basically were part of this oligarchy that had worked with the French and were now working with us.
High degree of corruption.
You had a chance to take a look at, I think, some of the excerpts from this series that's coming up. I think one of the questions that was raised to us was, at this point, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, do you feel like you're ready to have a real conversation? Do you feel like this country is really ready, and the people who experience this are at the point where they can talk about this candidly? Or is it still to this day too painful?
That's a tough question. I imagine that time begins to create the shadow that clouds our memory. And I mean, this body of work by Ken is just absolutely phenomenal. It has to be seen. But the degree to which it stimulates a conversation that changes anyone's mind, heck, so many of us who were participants in the war and lived through that era, we're on the sidelines now at the very best. So the younger generation, heck, they have a hard enough time thinking about where, pinpointing Afghanistan and Iraq on the map, much less wondering where the heck Vietnam is.
Well, I think, certainly it's going to stimulate conversation.
Do we need to have acknowledgement and closure at this point in time? Maybe for the next generations?
Sort of been left out there, yeah. I think we ought to have some conclusion. We ought to be able to, as a nation, to look at, what was that experience and what should we repeat from it and what should we avoid from it so that we don't put any of us through any of this. It isn't just the veterans, it's the families too. For the 30-some years I worked with Vietnam veterans and their families. And this stuff just affects everybody. If you've got PTSD, if you've got anger and rage and you have unemployability, it's going to affect your wife, your kids, the way you look at the world, the way they perceive the world. So it's really important. What I'm concerned about is when we talk about stimulating conversation, I'm concerned about stimulating emotions and moods. And I would really encourage any Vietnam vet or the family of a Vietnam vet to call a vet center. We got two here on Oahu. We have two on the Big Island. We have one on Kauai. The number is real simple to remember, 973-VETS. Just call them and they'll steer you to the right kind of services because this is going to pull up stuff. We were talking before we sat down here and about how our day was. And when you start talking about Vietnam and thinking about Vietnam, you begin to, you stir up the stew and things come up. So I think it's really important that Vietnam vets and their families know that there is help out there staffed by other veterans that you can talk to and share your experiences, your anger, whatever you have.
Do you write differently now about the Vietnam War, what's come out of this, or what you want to say?
Well, I don't write in any extensive depth about it, but I have written about it repeatedly because it comes up in very crucial times in Hawaii's past and in the lives of particular people. And it's a very deep thing. So it didn't change.
For people who are writing about it, whether it be you or someone else, what do you think needs to be discussed at this point? What needs to be shared?
I don't know anybody who's writing about it, frankly. People avoid the subject like the plague, and now Ken Burns is, rolling out this very ambitious film series, and are we prepared for this? Are we prepared to quote the trailer over and over says have a conversation, and it's like I said before this, I put off thinking about this until today, and then I spent the whole day thinking about it and reading some things. And by the time I got here tonight, I could feel that knot in my stomach, And that's just one little straw in the wind, tiny straw in the wind. I don't think as a community or a country we're really ready to have healing around this. It's something we've sort of agreed to not talk about.
To this day.
And that's been the closest to, a solution. I'll toss out something that's certainly not everybody would agree with. But basically losing the Vietnam War was a military humiliation. It was the sight of our embassy being overrun.
Well, this is no doubt something that's going to be covered as well in this series. I'm so sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I know we're wrapping up on time here. But thank you so much, all of you, for being here, from your guest, Tom, for sharing some of your experiences, such extensive coverage during the day with the Star Bulletin, Vietnam veterans as well, coverage there. Steve and Tim, thank you so much for sharing some of your experiences. I know we just hit a little bit of it. And of course, a happy birthday to Senator Akaka. So the Vietnam War film series is going to begin Sunday night at 8 p.m. coming up soon. 10 episodes scheduled for Sunday through Thursday evenings for the next 2 weeks. You can also find the streaming content at pbshawaii.org. And also on Thursday, October 5th, live at 8 p.m., we invite you to join us for PBS Hawaii's first Kākou, Hawaii's Town Hall. So we're asking everyone this question: have you fact-checked your truth? You have the next couple of weeks to get ready with your answer in this environment of fake news, trolling, and social media bubbles. Some say the truth is now overrated. Sounds a little outrageous maybe, but what do you think? So we'll be back next week with our next Insights program, October 12th. Until then, I'm Laurie Amata for Insights on PBS Hawaii. A hui hou.